Inner Legends, I hope that you're really well. Now, I took off 24, 36 sort of hours to try and recover my voice. Now, I think it's done a little bit, but it's still very sore as I've lost it for now a couple of months. But I hope you're doing better than me. So today, we're going to look at some footage. We're going to talk about these missile strikes, what may be a lot worse than we first thought. And we'll also have a laugh at my expense from some recent hate mail. But as always, we'll start with having a look at the maps and talking about the situation at the front. Now, of course, in center here we have Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv. Red, areas which have been occupied since 22. Purple, since 14. Areas green, liberated since the beginning of the 22 invasion. So here we've got Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. Now, the talk of everything, where we're going to go in, first off, is have a look at Bakhmut. Now, before we actually have a look at the maps, there is a weapon system that I am dying to have a go on, and this is absolutely wild. So these Russian troops taking the 30mm 2A42 autocannon gun out of a BMP and are now using it as a crew-served weapon. Now, this is bloody wild, and to be honest, if someone has one of these on a range, I want to have a go. You know, for context, for those who speak bald eagles per freedom, 50 cal is 12.7mm, and this is 30mm by 165. So let's have a look at the difference just in shell here. So this is your normal 50 cal and 30 by 165. This is what that is firing. This is them next to each other. So 5.56, your normal NATO sort of M4 round, your 50, and then this bloody round. And the actual projectile, this is the difference of what we're looking at in projectile size. This would ride like our bull. And you can see these Russian troops inside with these like painters sort of gas masky things on. No eye protection, which would be like my first thing for this. And I can't even see hearing protection, which would be my next big one for this. And just look at the size of these bloody rounds. This thing is bloody wild. And it's just the way, you know, these weapons, you know, they might have more of these weapons than vehicles or use them here or that. And something we do see through war is a lot of development like this and just using things in different ways. You can speak about Australian soldiers in the First World War doing things to fire weapons over the top of trenches and also weighting down triggers for the removal of the front line as well. But this is wild, and you can see here why they've got these masks on here of this weapon. The problem is a weapon system like this, it's not moving, it's in one spot. Now, there's going to be a lot of footage throughout this that is censored, but if you want the uncensored versions, it's going to be on my Patreon. So today is the 2nd of May. So let's just step back to yesterday. What did we see in Bakhmut? No real change. What did we see the day before? So if anything, from the 30th to the 1st, the 2nd, we've actually seen Ukraine take a little bit of land, or Russia push back along where this main road was. But we're only talking the difference of a block. So let's have a look at one of the Russian sources maps here and see what they are saying is different. If I don't zoom into my eyeballs bleed. This is this main road that we're looking off here, where it's got one out here and the one that loops around. This is this main road. And the Russian sources are saying that they have pushed right up along into here, right where my mouse is, and along this main road. But this is from a Russian source, and we know the deep state is a Ukrainian source. So we know that the fighting here is intense. We also have this footage here of a artillery shell striking Ukrainian forces in Bakhmut, right on top of where these guys are. And they get up from this and run away. I'm unsure what injuries or casualties were actually in this footage, but the man with the GoPro does get up, and where this was geolocated to was this area here. Now, let's have a look at the ISW map. What is it showing? It is showing the claimed Russian control, almost the exact same as what we see in this Russian map here. Almost the exact same. So you see this angle down here, which is very similar, right to where this road loops around and down. The only thing that is showing different is it's showing more claim control in here where this road splits into two, that the Russian map here is not showing, where it is saying assessed control is up from this road, at least on the ISW map as well. As always, Bakhmut, let's have a look at the Rybar map as well. And as I say, I think the Rybar mixed with deep state is the best way to get an idea. And what is it showing? Well, this road here is this one that loops around here, and this road out to the right. So they are saying that they have pushed further up and are along the top of this road here and are fighting around the MiG-17 statue in around this region. So very similar, but very different on some little bits and pieces. Where else have we seen changes? And we have seen some change in Avdiivka as well, with Ukraine claiming back some territory. So let's go back to the 28th, the 29th, 30th, and then on the 1st, what we see is this major sort of push to the east here, and Russia lose some land. So we see that they maintain one area here upon this main road, but has definitely changed how this is looking. Do I know if it is a Ukrainian push through, or is it Russia taking up positions? That is what is unknown and has been speculated differently on both sides of this. The ISW is showing a different state in Avdiivka as well, with more only claimed control back to this black border, which was from the 2014 occupied area from Russia. So there has been some changes in the Avdiivka region too. Now, what we have seen is a change in Mariinka. Let's see how this changed. So from the 1st to the 2nd, we see this jump up through the blocks. Now, on the last video where we looked at the Rybar of this region, and what we were seeing was that the Ukrainian source was saying they were along this road and that Rybar had pushed up a few blocks. So it has sort of corrected maybe more so to the Rybar map here, but showing very similar, maybe just some different on the bank here, but as well as shown in grey zone. Other than that, they're the only real differences that we're actually seeing on the front line of this movement. And it may be slow for a few weeks, but then things will start really heating up once Ukraine's counter-offensive is launched. Now, speaking of counter-offensive, and you and I have spoken about the Russian defensive positions before. So on the UK intelligence update, it has said, since summer 22, Russia has constructed some of the most extensive systems of military defensive works seen anywhere in the world for many decades. These defenses are not just near the current front lines, but also have been dug deep inside areas Russia currently controls. Imagery shows that Russia has made a particular effort to fortify the northern border of occupied Crimea, including the multi-layered defensive zone near the village of Medvedivka. Russia has also dug hundreds of miles of trenches well inside internationally recognized Russian territory, including in the Belgorod and Kursk regions. The defenses highlight Russia's leaders' deep concern that Russia could achieve a major breakthrough. However, some of the works have likely been ordered by local commanders and civil leaders in attempts to promote the official narrative that Russia is threatened by Ukraine and NATO. So where we're seeing the most of this work done is down to where we see that they could go through to Melitopol and then into Crimea here. And we spoke in length about this in a video more. Speaking of Bakhmut, we have some figures here that have come out only in the past 24 hours and reported by the BBC, saying half the dead are Wagner mercenary, that 20,000 soldiers have been killed since December and 80,000 have been wounded. They talk about Bakhmut being symbolic importance for both sides, saying Russia's attempt at an offensive in the Donbass largely through Bakhmut has failed. Russia has been unable to see any strategic or significant territory, although they have seized 90% of Bakhmut currently. We estimate that Russia has suffered more than 100,000 casualties, including over 20,000 killed in action. This is from December. The bottom line is that Russia's attempted offensive has backfired after months of fighting and extraordinary losses. Now, these losses, mixed with, they say, that half of Wagner mercenary group. Now, Wagner is comprised of a few different types of soldiers. We have the elite soldiers and, of course, the conscripts. And from my conversations with people really in the know, so that most of the casualties were those conscripts or the prisoners that they chucked into the absolute meat grinder. He added not giving estimates on casualties because they are victims here. Russia is the aggressor. Now, there is plenty of reasons why they don't give Ukrainian casualty figures, but using that Russia is the aggressor is, of course, one of them to keep the morale high, but also they don't want to deter any support for Ukraine as well, as the US is backing Ukraine. General Christopher Cavoli, the commander of the US European Command, on Wednesday has made comments about Russia's remaining firepower. Now, this was mostly shared by pro-Russian sources. So just for some clarity here and some both sides, it has also been reported by CNN as well here. And this is the article by CNN with the quotes he has made. And those quotes he has made, I've got in these videos here.
The Russian ground force has been degenerated somewhat by this conflict, although it is bigger today than it was at the beginning of the conflict.
So there he's speaking of pure numbers. Now, we do know that there are probably more Russian troops now with, them mobilizing, moving people in, but as well as Russia did lose a number of high quality troops, such as the paratroopers, the VDV, who got thinned out dramatically in the first really weeks or months of the war. But just pure numbers, there are probably more.
The Air Force has lost very little. They've lost 80 planes. They have another 1,000 fighters and fighter bombers. The Navy has lost one ship. So they still use all of that conventional power as well, and they mix them all together, sir.
There he talks about that the actual threat to the Air Force and Navy, how much has actually been worn down, is nowhere near as much as some sources will state. What we don't know is the quality of that equipment, especially the air equipment, how much of it is serviceable and usable. Probably a large majority of it, what we don't know. And why are we not seeing that superiority by that Air Force at all? Yes, Russia controls more of the sky than Ukraine does, but is it a complete air superiority? It is definitely not. And, Ukrainian air defense still poses a massive issue for fighters and bombers. But as well as the Navy, the thing is, in this type of war, Russia can't really bring their Navy into the fight other than firing super expensive caliber cruise missiles into Ukraine.
I'd like to underline your comment about the specificity of the degradation of the Russian forces. Much of the Russian military has not been affected negatively by this conflict. Much of the Russian military has not been affected negatively by this conflict.
Sorry, it repeats there just due to where I pulled this off of, but this is during the same interview.
One of those forces is their undersea forces. It's hard to talk in public, as you well know, sir,
Undersea forces, he's meaning submarines.
About undersea warfare and our efforts in that regard. But I can say that the Russians are more active than we've seen them in years. And this is, as you pointed out, despite all of the efforts that they're undertaking inside Ukraine.
What we do know is they can't really speak much about submarines because submarines are the most secret thing that any country has in its arsenal. So, they can't speak on theirs, and what they can actually speak of on Russia's submarines, they don't want to give away as exactly. If they know where something is, then they can move it, if that makes sense. Now, from the front line, we have some comments by both a Russian and a Ukrainian soldier. So it's from the 7th of April, so about a month ago. And this gentleman was said to be a convict or an ex-convict put into then the Russian forces.
Ситуация у нас очень тяжелая. Меня зовут Я, вообще родился в Ленинграде еще. 3 мая 1987 с 2015 года отбывал наказание в казенное учреждение исправительной колонии номер 4 до 20 февраля 23 года. 21 февраля, 20 февраля не было, мы приехали, рота порядка, командир был такой, никакого начальства нету, по фамилиям, по который приезжал, издержанного удовольствия выплатили только 40 тысяч.
Speaking about how hard the conditions are, how hard they had their commanders on them, and also that the lack of pay as well.
Контракт был заключен на полгода. Никаких условий, в принципе, в контракте не было прописано. Можно сказать, просто
the conditions of the contract were to just survive.
Выделили отдельной группой 22
Being an assault
человека,
group, storm
штурмовая
group
группа, так называемая, что такой так называемый Миша.
This is a problem we've seen with Russia's infantry troops, is a lack of command and control. One of the biggest issues we've seen.
Насколько я понимаю, не военный, просто доброволец Москвы.
Anyone who served in the infantry knows that good commanders make or break everything.
Штраух Владимир, позывной немец,
So, speaking about the conditions on the front line, here we have a Ukrainian soldier as well.
Не знаю, к кому сейчас это, к адвокату или, к пану, судье. Нас завезли на ноль, я Степанов Евгений Романович, позывной Зора, 28. Нихуя не объяснив, не видели ни наказа, нихуя. Нас завезли сразу. У нас до Питера, грубо говоря, 50 метров. Тут трупов наших, не столь важно. Нам ничего не объяснив. И теперь нам говорят, не факт, что вас выведут, может быть, задержат вывод, потому что нет распоряджения. Наказа даже на уезд не было. Боевое распоряджение, як такового, немає.
Something we've seen throughout the war on both sides is the guys on the ground, the guys at the front, don't know what's going on and they don't have support.
Так что, если мы будем отказываться И вот на самом деле нас поведут в суд, вот доказательство, что как бы мы тут ни при чем, а мы объясняем. У нас грязное оружие, все. У нас нету еды, почти ни хера. У нас воды вот это вот все, что привезли. А нас человек 16 завезли сюда. Как бы, вот как мы живем, нам даже кто-то живет, у них все есть, а мы приехали, нас тупо закинули, потому что не было кем перекрыть. Вот свидетели, с которыми я.
Фамилия, имя, отчество.
Чебаненко Сергей Васильевич.
Ивановский Александр Сергеевич. Когут Сергей Васильевич.
Вот эти люди со мной, они подтвердят любое, то есть.
So the situations everywhere are just incredibly difficult, and seeing young guys like that in the prime of their life fighting these wars, but then also having a lack of, support from even who they're fighting for. Last night there was another barrage of missiles into Ukraine from Russian bombers. The air raid sirens sounded across Ukraine for multiple hours. Now, Ukrainian authorities report that they have shot down, here we see, 15 of the reported 18 missiles fired from 9 Tu-95S and 2 Tu-160s, which begs the question of why so many planes to only fire 18 missiles when the Tu-160 can carry 12 by itself. There's been a lot of speculation of why this is happening, but these are being fired from outside Ukrainian airspace in relative safety for the bomber, as these long-range bombers sit outside Ukraine's current air defense range. This is why Ukraine has the need for modern fighters, say F-16s or something equivalent, and the ability to strike within Russia. Because if these bombers sit outside of the air defense within the Russian Federation, air territory, then they're basically in safety. One of these missiles has caused a huge explosion in Pavlohrad, which is here on the map. So near Dnipro, in this region here, just to the east of Dnipro. This is where it was geolocated to. Now, what exactly was hit was yet to be confirmed, and originally from multiple Australian accounts, it was reported that it hit a train loaded with S-300, which is Ukrainian air defense missiles. But from the geolocation, we know that this is now the most likely position that I'm seeing, shared amongst multiple people geolocating certain things. And what is here is the chemical plant. Let's have a look at some of this explosion. And this is an extremely large explosion here. It looks like a nuclear weapon has gone off. And from here, we can see that then the shockwave hits. There, we see the shockwave come through, and this unbelievable explosion coming up into the sky from here. An incredible heat in this region as well. So here we have more footage as well. So you see it rising up in the sky here, and you can hear as that shockwave hits, all the glass being blown out. You can see the shockwave travelling across the sky here as well. And this is footage of afterwards as it continued to burn into the night. And here is security camera footage here of then the explosion. It blurs out because it's too bright and then comes back down. And it looks honestly like a nuclear weapon had hit. You can see things flying out from all directions in this region, and then the subsequent burning. In the Pavlohrad region, it is well known that there is stored solid rocket fuel from Ukraine's forfeited, dismantled intercontinental ballistic missiles, and storage of other rocket fuel, and also making new weapons in these chemical plants, making the rocket fuel for these weapons. And also, apparently here, according to the international campaign to ban landmines, the ICBL, the facility is also being used to store stockpiled anti-personnel landmines designated for destruction under the Mine Ban Treaty. Now, obviously, this is a super high priority target for Russia. And so these are a couple articles from years ago and some footage about this facility. So what we're going to look at here is some articles. So let's first start with the Pavlohrad mines, and I have some little bits and pieces highlighted here. So the destruction of 55 million stockpiled personal mines under the Mine Ban Treaty is one of the effects of this ICBL. Only 2 of the Mine Ban Treaty's 164 state parties have stockpiled anti-personnel mines left to destroy. So these 2 the stockpile deadlines for Greece and Ukraine's deadline of 2010. In Ukraine, we regret that there has been no stockpile destruction since 2020, and at the end of the agreement between Ukraine's Ministry of Defense and NATO's support and procurement agency to destroy the remaining stockpile mines at the Pavlohrad chemical plant. The ICBL is appalled by Russia's use of anti-personnel mines in Ukraine, which they have condemned, and the ICBL expressed serious concern over safety and security. The more than 3.3 million PFM series anti-personnel mines in Ukraine's stockpile. We seek reassurance that the PFM mine, which are the petal mines, stocks will not be used in combat operations. These are allegations that Ukraine forces have used PFM series mines in this conflict, which we've seen many times coming out that these mines, these petal mines, are being used. Now, from the BBC before this war, so this is January 24th, 2020. If there is an explosion, it could be the end. This is speaking of chemical plants in the Dnipro region, which is at Pavlohrad. So, situation around the facility where the rocket fuel is stored. Turns out state stopped financing the program for its disposal. Remnants of ballistic missiles, and the director of the plant said they may explode, causing a man-made ecological disaster for this and neighbouring regions. Now, Pavlohrad is a mining town. It continues on this article that we live in a ticking time bomb. If we already have a strategic facility in the city with a large amount of explosive fuel, then under no circumstances should the disposal process be stopped. The state must be clearly aware of what it is doing, that the same people live here as everyone else. We're a ticking time bomb. If there is an explosion, that is the end. The special danger, the man emphasizes the Pavlohrad on numerous mines and abandoned shafts. If the windows flew during small tests, then you can imagine what will happen if all the fuel stored in the Enterprise explodes. The fact is the city is actually dug up by mines and cut voids, being it's a mining town. If there is an explosion, then it will all collapse. And this was 2 years ago. 1.8 thousand tons of expired rocket fuel are stored on the territory of the Pavlohrad chemical plant. It has been 20 years since the expiration date. Speaking of these consequences, if Ukraine is not going to fulfill its international obligations, it should make appropriate statements, said the General Director of the Enterprise. However, the greatest danger, he says, is the threat of a large-scale man-made ecological disaster that will affect the region. We remember when there was an emergency in Beleklia, they simply ignored the rules for handling rocket fuel that was in the engine. And we're talking about only 180 kilograms of solid rocket fuel. For comparison, one stage contains 50,000 kilograms, and in our territory, 1.8 million kilograms. If an emergency happens, it will take almost 80 years to restore the ecosystem and 14 to 15 years to restore economic situation in Pavlohrad. Of course, this was before the invasion. If at least one element with fuel detonates, the chain reaction will follow. And this is, I think, probably what we saw here, was that rocket coming in from Russia probably did not have the actual boom in it to make that explosion that we saw. But I should also say we are not 100% sure that this is exactly what it hit. The only state who can provide an alternative is the US of the solid rocket fuel. However, the inability of the fuel and critical condition of the fuel containers of Ukrainian ballistic missiles allow them to be transported at a speed of no more than 5 kilometers an hour and at a distance of no more than 3 kilometers. So you're starting to see how hard this stuff is to get rid of and to move. The State Space Agency of Ukraine, to which the Pavlohrad chemical plant is subordinate, does not know the reasons for the suspension of the program. So the agency submitted the proposals to the government, in which they indicated their required amount, which is 800 million hryvnias, which I believe is about $22 million. In the budget for this year, almost 31 million hryvnias were provided, which is not enough for the safe storage of rocket housings with fuel. The disposal of solid rocket fuel will not be stopped. The Minister of Finance said that they could allocate the money, but did not specify when. So these are from people who live in the region and have worked at the plants. I'll be honest, every time we went to work, we didn't know if we would return home. We now find ourselves in the threshold of an emergency situation, but on the scale of the whole city. The situation is critical. Remember, this was now more than 3 years ago. I worked at the chemical plant. When there is war in the country, it is unacceptable to stop funding it. It is no secret that all the expiration dates of this fuel have already been exhausted, and it is practically impossible to predict the possible reaction. Also, I found on a Ukrainian official YouTube channel this video, which is titled "The Pavlohrad chemical plant will produce fuel for Ukrainian missile systems." So the plant is back up and running, also making fuel. So here we have this video. Let me just go back a few seconds.
Где производятся ракетные двигатели для
Практически
всех
almost all missile systems that exist in Ukraine, including for the Armoured system.
высокоточных вооружений. Вы знаете, что, наверное, в феврале месяце указом президента 59 была возобновлена программа ракетная,
So the missile program was resumed, and this is now 2 years ago. I don't have a specific date on when this was, but this video is from 2 years ago, which is more so than the beginning of the war, but we don't know exactly when.
Заказы на сегодняшний момент, по сути дела, благодаря вмешательству первых лиц в стране, получилось так, что теперь программа возобновлена. Мы сюда набираем.
So, talks about recruiting, making jobs, and the rest of the video is them walking around looking at some of the stored stuff as well, but also the production of new weapons here.
Тот коллектив, который здесь работает, и высоко ценят те усилия, которые руководство
highly
прилагает.
appreciates the team and the management. So it isn't perfectly translated, but that is the best that I can get for this small amount of time. Now, about these strikes and the subsequent explosion, on Twitter, Zelensky has said, Pavlohrad, Dnipro region, terrorist missiles claim the lives of 2 people, young guys, 40 or more people, women, children and men, receive medical care after injuries and traumas, but nothing else. And I need to say again, we don't exactly know what was hit there, but we do know that explosion was huge. Now, online, people are asking, did Russia intentionally target this site knowing it could result in an ecological disaster? And also, is this a war crime? We've seen many ecological disasters throughout this war on both sides. We saw strikes on Nord Stream and multiple oil depots, and these are all ecological disasters like this is as well, but these are not seen as war crimes as well. And we should say we don't know the full extent and exactly what was hit and the ecological fallout that could come from this. So that's the end of the official news. What we're going to have a look at now is from some hate mail that I have received in my inbox, just for a little bit of laugh, something else. I get things like this all the time, and death threats and all that, but let's just have a look. So I get this email from Mr. Simon, as you can read through it, but some of the good bits. An evil person, you deserve that tumour. I'm serious. You don't realise how much damage you're doing to Australia and the rest of the world by perpetuating misinformation. The world would be better off without you if you were doing this on purpose, which, of course, I would never put out misinformation on purpose, and bringing the tumour into it, as people always seem to do. I don't know if you're being paid. This is something that people always lean into, is I'm being paid off by the KGB, the FSB, the CIA, from both sides, that I'm always getting paid off. If I was getting paid off, I wouldn't have ads on my video and plug my Patreon. You probably just ignore and think all governments are corrupt and media is corrupt. Well, I don't think you know that much about governments or media. Well, governments and media are very corrupt. Now, I'm not saying that they're corrupt, that you shouldn't believe anything, but we have seen massive corruption. It's getting exposed all the time, of corruption from the lowest to the highest levels of government. You sound like a Trumpist from America. Well, no. And a Putinist from Russia. So apparently they fall all in the exact same category, telling me to wake up, which is the typical of crowds being like, wake up to this. On both sides we have that. I replied to the first message, thank you for your views and AdSense money, purely to trigger this, because I don't have the time or the effort to buy into this and try and actually have an argument, because you're not going to win the argument. You're not going to be able to reason with someone. So take the piss and maybe just trigger a little bit more. So you are evil. Die sooner then. You're worsening humanity and prolonging a war, plus spreading misinformation and mistrust in the media. Now, I don't think that you should have mistrust in the media, but you should question the media. You should always, and I'm part of it, you should question me. You should question Baby Watch. And of course, you should question big media with big sponsorships and shareholders and a reason for narratives as well. Now, do you use multiple sources and not rely on a single source and learn how to read between the lines and not only read headlines? You're a human trash dude. So I'd say that I'm one of the biggest to actually use multiple sources. I use both a lot of pro-Russian, a lot of pro-Ukrainian, and try and mix the two and then see where we are in the middle here. And that I am single-handedly prolonging the war somehow. So why are you so carefree with innocent death, not only Ukrainian but also Russian? Now, this is something that I will say on, I think of, I'd say, or most of the people in my field on this, that I am probably the most sensitive towards, that these are just young guys dying on the front line. I don't care what uniform they're wearing, whatever, this is horrific. And if you've watched any of my stuff, you will understand that with my background in the military, also being in Ukraine, seeing young men on both sides chewed up by weapons like this, that I am super against any violence against anyone. So that is just complete lie. It shows it is not consumed anything of mine other than my titles and mistrust in just information. That they're on the front with limited equipment. They have wives, children, and parents too. You're a fucking disgusting man. Give a shit about others, not including yourself in that. Now, if you don't think I give a shit about others, a lot of my content is pointed towards how horrific this actually is, and that we need to find ways that reduce human casualties in this. I always call it out where I can on both sides, and not only do I report on one side, I'll report on the other side when I think something they've done is bullshit. As well as in my life, the reason I have an OM after my name is raising money for research in cancer that I'll never see a cent of. I'll never see any of the research come out because it will far outlong me. So I reply, I'm just taking the piss at this point. Yes, I'm single-handedly prolonging the war. The FSB and CIA pay well. Why would I lose that money? So it goes on, and I have now just an inbox full that I don't even reply to of this certain guy. I'm going to make it my sole objective to comment on everything you post until you die, unless you start being unbiased and posting unbiased shit. And I'd say, I'd like to claim that I think I'm fairly unbiased in this. I go, chief of all the propaganda to go after, I am not the guy. And then get fucked by your tumour. Don't know if that's physically possible. Die, please. So you're admitting you're intentionally spreading BS, which I don't know how to admit to anything. By the way, how's the health insurance in Australia? Probably a lot better in the States. It is a lot better in the States. We have Medicare. Complain about your government, I'm sure. I'm a tax-paying citizen who votes mandatory. I can complain about whatever I'd like to, and I actually don't think I publicly complain about the government at all. You complain about social medicine, probably, but happy to accept it. No. If you watch any of my older stuff about when I was diagnosed with my tumour, I often say that if I was in any other country, I would either not receive care or I couldn't afford the care I was receiving. And our public health system has a lot of problems. Don't get me wrong, we have a lot of issues. But someone like myself with a tumour that I could not help at all, I count my blessings every day that I was born in a country like Australia where I can, have healthcare like this for free. It's incredible. And the army looked after me a lot as well. And I say, bro, in all seriousness, look after yourself. You're more cancerous than me. So, and then it's just, now I wasn't going to make any of this public, but then absolutely publicly went after me all through social media, spreading information about the war, Ukraine in favour of Russia. Just be aware of the guy. He's jaded from his time here somehow. And then goes on further about, where's the other one? Quoting me, yes, I am single-handedly prolonging the war. The FSB and CIA pay well. Why would I lose that money? Take that as you will. Why would he joke about the war and deaths? You will know that I do give a shit about people. I care about humanity. I'm disappointed in humanity with how this stuff happens, and that I don't work for the FSB or CIA or both for that matter. But I thought that was funny. I thought that's something we'd look at and maybe bring more lightness to this, and as well as dark humor. Anyone who's ever served in the military, unlike Mr. Simon, who judging has never served a day in the military, a day in Ukraine, or spent his time watching fucking CNN and abusing people online, that dark humor comes with the territory. It comes as a coping mechanism. Of course it does. But legends, that's the end of me for today. Not the end of me overall like Simon would want, because apparently I'm going to get fucked by a tumour. But legends, if you'd like to support me, links down below. Never feel obliged. Look after yourself. Remember, uncensored stuff is on the Patreon. But other than that, look after yourselves. I hope you have a great day. And I'll speak to you soon. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.